Over these past many months, it's been a true gift to have the connection, the dibuk chaverim of these weekly Dvar Torah, Divrei Devekut from the RCA. Many of us in so many different places feel isolated now more than ever. And the dibuk chaverim is not only a kinyan she'Torah nikneit bo, but it's also something that truly creates a sense of community and mutual support. Toda lechol ha'osim b'melacha. It's my privilege to be able to share a few thoughts about Parshat Beshalach. We left Mitzrayim, as it were, Chag Pesach, Parshat Bo, Makat Bechorot, Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh. We marched through this week to Shabbat Beshalach, as it were, to Shvi Shel Pesach, and we get to Kriyat Yamsuf. At Kriyat Yamsuf, right before we hear the amazing Shirah, we have this moment of Nachshon ben Aminadav. And while there's a debate in the Gemara between Rabbi Yair, who views people and the tribes of Israel, the Shiftei Yah, rushing to go into the sea, Yehuda Bar Ilai, perhaps more realistically, suggests that people were hesitant, people were wary, until Nachshon ben Aminadav jumps forward into the sea, into the raging waters, and doesn't sit waiting for God's miracle, but as it were, forces God's hand. In Israel, Kfitzat Nachshon is a modern expression of someone who's willing to take everything biyadayim and rush in, often where braver men are wary to go. I remember as a young child in Montreal, when we first were introduced to the idea of Shirat Hayam in the daily Psukei de Zimra, our Rebbe that year was Rabbi Baruch Abramowitz. And he said, if you can't say Shirat Hayam like Nachshon ben Aminadav, willing to jump into the sea, then are you really able to get up and say Kriyat Shema and Tefillah and turn to God if you're not willing to believe in his salvation? And for years I struggled. And the truth is, not all of us are blessed to be Nachshons, to be able to jump in and face a raging sea with the emunah and the bitachon that it's going to split. And if you're blessed with a Nachshon personality, then ashrecha, and may it be successful for you. I want to share a different approach, an approach that comes out of the Beit Midrash of Kotsk, the Beit Midrash, that we can't necessarily rely on instantaneous miracles that's developed both in the Sfat Emet and in Reb Tzadok. And they suggest that Shinui Sidrei Breshit, the Kriyat Yamsuf, happens not because we jump into the water and are willing to say, God, I'm here, save me now, I'm relying solely on you, but rather, perhaps an even more challenging, but at least for me, more inspirational approach of saying, I'm willing to believe in change. I'm willing to imagine a world in which Yamli Abasha, in which seas can turn into dry land, into which my past does not define my future. I'm willing to imagine a world in which change is possible. And Rav Tzadok says, if you believe in change, then even the sea can turn to dry land. I think that here in Israel, the first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, is often cited in saying that in Israel, to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles. After these many months, we've all seen countless miracles, countless moments of kindness, of help, of mutual support to one another. We're privileged to live in such amazing communities. But I think it's not enough. I think what we also need is the power of imagination, the power to envision that Sidrei Breshit are not always as we thought they were. That sometimes things change, and things change radically and drastically. For this last almost year, we've all experienced those changes, but oftentimes they were thrust upon us. Albert Einstein suggests that imagination is more significant than knowledge. Knowledge is finite, but imagination is infinite. As we begin to leave here in Israel, the vaccinations are moving ahead, thankfully, very quickly, with a lot of siyata dishmaya and a lot of holy work by amazing doctors and nurses. Bezrat Hashem, that will be the case everywhere throughout the world. But it's not too soon to start imagining, how do we come back to our kilot? How do we come back to be Ovdei Hashem in a world that isn't what we experienced before? We're experiencing a moment of Yitziat Mitzrayim, Yitziat from one world to another. And are we just imagining that the same thing will continue, or are we willing to envision something that will be radically different? My bracha is that we have the courage to imagine, the courage to dream, the courage to be balei chazon, to see a world in which Yam Yabasha, the salvation is there. Are we willing to embrace it? Shabbat Shalom.